Welcome back. So today we are going to do something a little bit special, very special set. This is the Elysian Acoustic Labs Apostle. So I will kind of say, kind of right up front, I think doing reviews of your favorite sets or sets that you find absolutely fantastic is actually quite difficult, because no matter what I say, I think I'll finish it and think, well, I didn't kind of convey how special it is or how awesome it is or how much I love it. And I think it's really hard to capture all of that in a review. So I'll kind of say that right up front. Absolutely love this set. Fantastic set. We'll probably pick it up at some point when I find one used. And no matter what I say in this review or what my notes will say, I'll probably feel like it wasn't enough and it doesn't really convey how special it actually is. But yeah, absolutely kind of love the look of it. I think everyone has kind of seen what it looks like. Cable is actually quite nice as well. It's definitely using the ear connector. Those of you who are into ear connectors, you will kind of recognize that. It will also hamper your ability to use third-party cables unless you are an Effect Audio fan. So the graph itself, I don't know, I think it looks pretty similar. I think this part up until somewhere over there is very similar to Noir. I think it's not all that far from Elysian graphs as well. I think this part definitely changes, and obviously the drivers are actually very different. But yeah, I think that they do a very, very nice graph, and the graph I think rarely captures what is special about, I would say either Apostle or Noir. I think you could look at the graph and you would have no idea what it actually sounds like, or if you listen to it and look at the graph, there isn't that much correlation between the two. And with Apostle, it kind of starts right at the beginning, right? It's with the driver. So the 9.2 millimeter LSR dynamic driver, really, really awesome driver. I love that driver. I love it in here. I love it on Noir as well. I think that is a great dynamic driver, really nice for the lows. In the mid lows, they're doing the Knowles ED 30,000, which maybe is supposed to be 3,000. Balanced armature for low mids, Sonian 2300 for the mid highs, and Sonian ESTs on the highs. So again, kind of the tri-bridge trifecta of drivers. I love the dynamic driver, the LSR dynamic driver. I love when people combine Sonian and Knowles on the mids. That is kind of my favorite style of mids. And then ESTs up top. There's really almost no comparison from ESTs to anything else. I love planars. I love microplanars. I love balanced armatures, but there's sort of no substitute for ESTs. So is Apostle endgame material? And I think absolutely. It's really hard to capture everything, as I said, that I love about it, but we'll kind of try to walk through some of the things that I do love about it and some of the things that stood out to me about it. And I think kind of right off the bat, I think some high-end sets, these kilobuck sets and above, those sets aim to wow, and they tend to grab you immediately with some hook, like Treble, like on Mest. I think those of you who try the original Unique Melody Mest was kind of a set that kind of blew me away on the treble and how much there was. It was like literally a fire hydrant of treble hitting you from all directions. Really, really amazing set to listen to. Very much a wow moment in the first kind of sit down with it. But then there's other sets that just sound perfect. There isn't one hook to it. Everything just sounds right. There's nothing out of place. It just immerses you in music that just sounds right to your ears. And that's what I would say Apostle is. Like, I wouldn't say that there's one specific thing about it that I love, but it's just the overall presentation and how it immerses me and how it just sounds right and natural. All those things kind of combined make it like this is a set that there's quite a gap between this and like $500 sets, when I listen to it. And that's the way it's supposed to be. And so what does something like Limier's Maris and Apostle have in common? There's this understanding that a very clear upper range, not forced, but also not obscuring the upper range, can support a heavier, richer, fuller low end. I think both of these sets kind of get that right. And it's kind of this mess thing where there's some sets that have a very, very clear, very detailed upper range, and that's kind of one style of set. And then there's sets that sound very, very balanced, that do the low end and the upper end in a manner that sounds very rich and very full to me. And that's sort of sets that are appealing to me. And secondarily, the attention to space and imaging. I think both of these sets kind of got that right. And where I said that Apostle isn't a wow moment, I think the staging and the space that it creates actually is very close to a wow moment. and it still kind of blows me away when I pick it up and listen to tracks that I just haven't gone through before. They just are presented in a way, and I said the same thing about Mars. The space created, the imaging, all of that is very, very special. And again, Apostle is the trifecta of great drivers, that custom LSR dynamic driver, the Sonian plus Knowles pairing, which I prefer, and ESTs. And to this day, this is still the foundation of endgame sets, along with brands who know how to tune the 3 drivers in that configuration. So yeah, for me, it's definitely endgame material. I would have no problem kind of only listening to Apostle for the rest of my days. It's kind of right up there. So standout things, kind of starting at, and again, I'll say it begins with the LSR. I still love it. Like, there's just no other driver that hits and controls like it. And I don't mean like huge, big impacts. I mean, it does smaller impacts, and they feel very tactile and dynamic the way it should be. There's just no other dynamic driver that sounds like it to me. And when I saw that Plunge Audio picked it for an LSR driver for their Unity dynamic, I'm like, I know exactly why he picked that. It just has a unique sound that you don't hear on other sets. And the first time I heard Noir and sort of on Pilgrim as well, but on Noir it really stood out, and it just sounds different than everything else. So is there too much bass? Again, I would say he pushed the edge on level, but it's also an end game. It can do pop, rock, hip hop, more critical genres because it has quite a bit of speed to it. It's very dynamic. It has a lot of kind of tactile hit to it. It just covers a lot of genres, but keeping the bass controlled and tight. Everything else could be natural levels. No need to compensate for the occasional heavy bass track. So again, when you look at the graph, I would say this kind of doesn't look all that heavy, but in ear, it's actually kind of heavy because this is a little bit lower and this is kind of a lower as well. But again, when you get the end-to-end balance right, where you're not forcing this to be any bigger than it needs to be, and you're not really forcing anything in the treble to get above this, it comes across as very natural. There's nothing forced, there's nothing out of place. This just sounds naturally kind of extended and the way it should be. Again, it's just a lot of polish there, and he has a really, really good ear for pulling that off. So yeah, it's really nice when you don't have to compensate for anything that's going on in the lower end with some treble boost or something like that. It just sounds way more natural. And again, mid-centric sets, and I would kind of call this one more of a mid-centric set. Apostle can do... Mid-centric sets are typically vocal sets, and I think Apostle kind of doesn't really fit that mold. It can go from classical to EDM, and yeah, okay, classical is probably a little bit too bass heavy. There are moments where classical sounds really amazing and nice, but as soon as you get some maybe heavy lower end to classical, you're like, okay, well, maybe the bass is a little bit too heavy, but I'll kind of give it a pass. It's close enough. But at the end of the day, this is kind of a true no skip set is what I would call it. And maybe I didn't even skip the classical. I just kind of acknowledged that, yeah, it's probably a bit too heavy, but I definitely didn't skip it. So the mids, and again, in a mid-centric tuning, you reveal the mids. You need the resolve and the weight and the transparency to exceed expectations, and that's kind of what you're going to get on Apostle. You can't really hide under the bass. You can't say females are better than males. Everything needs to be right on both, right? You can't do just females. That's something that you find in much cheaper sets. This thing needs to do both male and female vocals with the same dynamics, with the same weight, with the same natural timbre to it, and that's kind of what you're going to get on Apostle. The mids on Apostle, very transparent. Again, this combination of Knowles and Sonian is sort of my favorite combination of the two. Sometimes you see hybrids do a Sonian on the low end because they do the nicer basser driver, or you see Sonian way up on the high end. But when you combine the two and sort of the best of kind of a Knowles sharpness, kind of note definition bit that you get on Knowles, combine that with the refined edge on a Sonian, that again gives you the natural resolve, a refinement to the mids that you don't get on Knowles alone. The separation from the bass allows the mids to spread out, have dimension. There's no lower truncation because there's too much bass. Even with the bass shelf, I would say you can still follow the mids all the way back into the bass. It's a really cool thing to listen to. And I wouldn't even say it's more textured, I would say, but your ability to hear more and feel in the room is just wild on Apostle. And again, it's what separates these lower than $500 sets from over $1,000 sets. It's literally that. It's the ability to convey you being in the room and reproducing everything of what the room sounds like, every instrument, the full range of sounds. And again, this is sort of the part where I will struggle to describe everything that Apostle does. And I will say that I'm going to undershoot how special the mids are and sort of how transparent they are and how they can convey being in the room. There's just no words for what that sounds like without actually listening to it. But yeah, I would say that when you're talking about people who say, well, they find end games about $500, I think there are some sets that are fantastic at $500, but when you get above $1,000, they're sort of this polish and refinement, and their ability to sort of convey that this is very real, this is what it sounds like to be standing in the room with musicians. That's sort of what separates these kind of sets from the lower price sets, and that's sort of what you look for at kilobuck sets and above. Kind of this one's about $1,700, and it should 100% sound like you are in the room. So the treble, again, mid-centric tuning plus ESTs should give you scalable, effortless treble. It's kind of what it does on Apostle. Why does it sound a little bit different? It sits right under the mids where it should. Still has plenty of engagement still plenty of energy for engagement, but there's really nothing obscured. There's nothing out of place. Linear treble in ear, but it's naturally decreasing to keep a constant level of detail out to the edge and really avoiding any unforgiving peaks, right? The Sony MBA plus ESTs help keep it laser sharp without going grainy or need to boost. Again, it's really, really hard to reproduce or to look at the graph and say what this sounds like in ear. ESTs sound a little bit different. They sort of combine the best of almost the other driver types, balanced armatures and planar. Their ability to sound laser and straight and very defined out to the edge of your hearing is something that planars can do, but planars don't have a more natural timbre to it. They still have a little bit of planar timbre to it. Balanced armature is very hard. They can certainly extend out to the edge. Very hard to not sound grainy or be a timbre or peaky. ESTs is sort of the only thing that really accomplishes what ESTs can do, and they do it very, very well. And Elysian is very, very good at tuning ESTs and making this transition, from amazing dynamic driver through balanced armature, all the way through ESTs to make it sound like a single driver doing a cohesive, reproduction of music. Is just something that's, again, I'll kind of say, it's not only the three driver types, it's people who know how to tune them, and they know how to tune them very, very well. So there are some nitpicks here, I guess. Mid-centric does almost need a flat amp. Otherwise, you're going to be tilting the balance. Again, this thing is very, very balanced. If you're into like a warm style amp, adding some little bit of warmth here is going to make this a little bit harder to hear. I think mid-centric tends to sound better on flat amps. That's just kind of my opinion. And again, it is very, very revealing, very transparent. It's going to sound less forgiving if you are used to that warm style amp. And if you are a V-shaped fan, the treble will be less engaging because it's more mid-centric and it's kind of tucked right under the mids where it should be for mid-centric tuning. But if you are a V-shaped fan, Apostle is probably not for you. I think the Mysticraft is apparently going to be, the Tribrid is going to be a little bit more V-shaped, so that might be more in line with your preferences. But for me, love a mid-centric, beautifully executed mids, and that's kind of what you got on Apostle. So thank you guys again for tuning in, and I will see you next time.